Welcome back. Today I'm going to do a transmission fluid and filter change. I'm going to drop the pan on this 2003 Chevy Impala, and after I change the filter, I am going to show you how to flush the rest of the transmission fluid out of the system and replace it with new fluid. Generally speaking, when you change just the fluid by dropping the pan and change the filter, you change somewhere between about 30 and 70%. In this car, you change about 70%. It's one of the better ones where most of the fluid will come out with a change. But a lot of cars will get 30 to 40% out of it, and that means you have 70 or 60% that hasn't been changed still in the transmission and torque converter. So, some newer cars, it's a little more difficult to do. Sometimes they have to go to the dealer unless you have special equipment. This particular car is pretty easy to do, and I'm going to show you how to change all the fluid in your transmission and hopefully extend the life of your transmission. I know this is an area that I run into many people who don't really think about the transmission very much, and it doesn't have to be changed nearly as much as motor oil or engine oil, but it does need to be changed. And in this car, it's 100,000 miles. I do mine probably every 50, which might be a little overkill, but I'd rather be safe. It's not that expensive to do. But this is an area I see a lot of issues with cars and transmissions with people who have higher mileage because they don't think about it and they never change the fluid. So this is something you really should add to your maintenance schedule. If you keep cars for years at a time, several years, and you put a lot of miles on them like I do, you do want to change the fluid. It wears out just like engine oil wears out. It just takes longer to do that. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Hopefully this will help you out. So to drain most American made vehicles, drain transmission pans, they generally do not have a drain plug. This Chevy Impala does not have one. A lot of your foreign ones such as Toyota, Honda, they have a drain plug in the pan for the transmission, which makes it really nice. But you can drain it in two different ways. I have a fluid extractor, which I'm going to stick down the dipstick hole for the transmission and pump the fluid out of the pan. If you don't have that, you just have to get underneath of it. Make sure you have a drain pan that's big enough, because it does make a little bit of a mess when it comes out, and loosen the bolts on the bottom of the drain pan and kind of break it loose in one corner a little bit and let it drain out, and then take the pan off. I'm going to try to avoid a lot of that mess by using this fluid extractor to do that. But like I said, if you don't have one, you just got to take the pan off slowly, let it drain out, and then just remove the pan. Dipstick for this transmission is in the back along the firewall. Feed this down into the transmission hole here. Show you that. Try to show it to you at least. So you can see in the back, right on the firewall, that's the fill for the transmission right there. So I'm just going to feed this line from the extractor all the way down in there as far as I can. It's bottomed out, and I'm just going to start pumping the fluid out of it. I just wanted to show you, I'm not finished draining this yet, but that's about 4 quarts in the extractor right now, and there's 7 quarts in this transmission that should come out, so I wanted to stop about halfway through because it's got about a 7 quart capacity. I didn't want to fall all the way up. I'll just show you how that works. So once you start it, basically, and get some pressure on it, it just siphons, and then it just keeps emptying out the transmission. And so I'm going to empty that out and then hook it back up and then finish cleaning out the transmission fluid from the pan before we take it off. Okay, I had a little technical difficulty with the camera taking the pan off, so I can't show you that because the battery was dead and I didn't realize it. But I have the pan off of the transmission. I've cleaned it up, basically brake clean. A couple things to note. It you want it clean. It has to be clean. There is a magnet in the pan right here. Just sticks in there, sticks to the pan. You want to pull it out, wipe it off with a rag. It collects any of the powdery metal residue, keep it from getting circulated back into and through the transmission. So clean it, put it back. What I will tell you, when you take these off, now I used, as I said before, an extractor and basically extracted almost all the fluid out of the pan before I loosened it. If you don't have one of them and you're going to drain this without, by dropping the pan, you do not want to take the bolts out of this and then try to drain it, because you will make a pretty big mess if you do that. You want to loosen the bolts, and where you want it to drain the most on one end, probably this end for this one because it's narrow and you can kind of control it, you want to loosen them a little more, and then when you break that seal, the pan's going to still be held up by the bolts, but it's going to tip more to the side that you let down a little more, and it's going to tend to drain in that area more. It will make a mess if you're not careful. So just be careful doing that, especially if it's hot, because it does come out of there. When it starts coming out of there, it's going to come out of there in a hurry. And this pan's 8 quarts, almost 8 quarts when you change the pan and filter in this. So there's a lot that comes out. So just be aware of that. So I have cleaned it very well. I've cleaned all the bolts that go back into it. You want to make sure they're clean so you get a good torque reading. This pan gets torqued back on with 10 foot-pounds. It's not very much, and I'll usually do that in 2 passes. I'll do 5 foot-pounds first, and kind of from the middle out pattern, kind of crisscrossing back and forth, and then I'll go back around and crisscross again at 10 pounds to seal it up. I will say a couple things. The filter kit that you get for these comes with a gasket. You can see this is kind of flexible, just a rubber. I don't like these in general. If I had to use these, I would silicone both sides of this before I put it on, and then I would let it sit for at least a couple hours once it's torqued down and let that silicone set, or better yet, overnight if you can. This particular car, this transmission from the factory it comes with a gasket, which is a rigid gasket. It's a kind of rubber gasket, but it has plastic hard inserts right around where the bolts are. It's reusable. You want to reuse these if it's like this, or get another one that's the OEM style. They just seal better. This has not leaked. I changed this at around 50,000 miles once already, and it did not leak at all, and I don't expect it to leak. As long as it's in good shape, you clean it up, reuse these type of gaskets if they're reusable, because they just seal better. So you want to do that. So we're going to go back underneath. I'm going to show you how to take the filter off, change the filter, and then we're going to put the new filter in and torque this pan on to 10 foot-pounds, and then we're going to refill the transmission with the amount we took out, which is about 7.5 quarts, somewhere between 7.5 and 8 quarts. And then I'll show you how to actually flush the rest out of the torque converter and the transmission. So I have the new filter here. I was just going to show you this real quick before we go down underneath and change the old one out. So you do want to check it against the one that's currently in there. Make sure it's the right filter. This is a new seal. That's what it looks like. Basically metal with a rubber kind of coating, an O-ring at the top. I'll show you how to take this out. There's one in the transmission that needs to come out when you pull the filter. So we will pull the filter, and these can be tough to get out sometimes, but I'll take a small screwdriver or a small pry bar, and I'll get it started, and we'll wiggle it out of there, and then I'll show you how to put the new one in. It basically sits on like that, basically, and you push the filter up into that seal. There is no bolt on this particular filter. Sometimes, depending on the car, there's a couple bolts in addition to it fitting up into the seal, and you have to take those bolts off first. Just check your car. So here you can see the filter, and this one is just, the seal's up here. See, there's still some fluid in it, which I kind of expect. And we're just going to wiggle this out. Come on, there it goes. So it just presses up in there. The rest of that fluid's going to drain out. Right up in there, right there. That's the seal that I'm going to drive out of there. I'm just going to take a real fine bladed screwdriver and get it under the lip of that seal and just kind of dent it in and get it where I can get a hold of it, and then I'll pull it out of there, and we'll put the new one in. A little hard to show you. It's just in a bad spot. Try to get it high. See if we can just drive it in here. Just gotta be careful. Now I have to get it out because I put a hole in it. But you just keep working around the seal little by little till you can get it enough. You don't want to gouge it, you just want to knock the seal out. So I'll just get it enough so I can get a little bit loose. So once I get that started, I'm going to use a bigger screwdriver, which won't have a tendency to cut through the seal as much, and use that to drive the seal in some more. Bigger screwdriver. Probably can't see most of this, but you just got to take your time. Try to get a hold of it and wiggle it out of there. It takes a little bit of doing. It's coming out. You just keep working it little by little. And it is coming out. There it comes. There it goes. Popped it right in there. So there you can see. Oh, you can't see, but now you can. It'll kind of bent up, but what I don't care about the seal so much is bending the seal. I don't want to tear it up around it. So I'm careful not to tear that up because you got to put the new one in there. So there's the old one. We're going to put the new one in. We're going to use a socket to do that. We're going to just tap it into place right here, new seal. And I'm just going to use a socket that's a little bit bigger. And I'm going to use that basically to drive it in there, to just tap it in. You don't have to hit it hard. I'm going to start it in there by hand, try to get it as set as I can. And then I'm just going to use this socket and a hammer, tap it into place. Key to this is trying to get it started even. So you just got to take your time, keep looking at it, and keep driving it in. It'll go. You just got to don't whack on it. You just keep tapping it in and it's going. You can't see it, I know, but you can kind of feel it. Almost, not quite. And you should hear the difference there. That's seated all the way in. So that's seated all the way in now. That's what I want, a new seal. I have a new filter. I've already checked it against my existing filter to make sure it's right. We're just going to press this filter back up in place. It goes right up into that seal. Just wiggle it back in there. I'm going to get a rubber hammer just to tap it in place. I don't want to use a metal for this. I don't want to damage the filter. They're supposed to be pretty tight, so it will be a little tight. There it is. Make sure that, okay, that's it. So, right there, filter's in place. Now I'm going to go around this whole pan again with brake clean, of course, chemical of 1001 uses. Get any oil that's dripped down. I want to get all that off, and I'm going to then put my pan in place. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a couple bolts, one on either side, get them started in to hold the pan up in place, make sure the gasket's right, and then I'll just start them all, get them all started. I'll run them up with the air ratchet, but I will not tighten them down with the air ratchet. This does not take a lot of torque, so I'm just going to run them up with an air ratchet. If you have one, it's great. If you don't, you just have to do them by hand. Take a little longer. Just to get them close, and then I will start torquing them down. You should always start these by hand. You don't want to cross thread these. It just becomes a real pain if you have to tap one of these out and fix it. Set on 5 foot-pounds. I'm just gonna start there. These pans don't take a lot to tighten them up. This is the exciting part, by the way. I am not a torque Nazi in any sense of the word, but for this stuff, if you don't want it to leak, you need to torque it to what it says to torque it to. A lot of stuff you just need to get close. Pans and gaskets and things like that, always a good idea to get them where they say to set them, because if you don't, they will leak. Just checking them all here. I think I have them all now. Good. So that's 5. I'm going to take it to 10. Now I'm going to just go back over it with 10 foot-pounds, and that's all at once. Just going to do the same thing now. And that's it. 10 foot-pounds. Now we'll go back up top and fill it up. I just have a long funnel right in the dipstick tube for the transmission. I'm going to fill through that. I will say, I use synthetic in everything that I do. I like synthetic. I think it's worthwhile for the little bit of extra money it costs for synthetic, to use synthetic. I think it helps the transmission run a little bit cooler, which I like. So I'm going to run about 7.5 quarts in here. I'm just going to fill it back up. There's nothing really to see here. Nothing to see. Move along. Pay no attention to the man with the transmission fluid in his hand. It's not really exciting at all. We're down out of the car looking at the passenger side of the radiator, and you see this hard line right there with that white plastic, this piece. That is the output from the transmission going into the oil cooler, the radiator, to cool the transmission oil. I've taken the bottom plastic shield off to get it out of the way, but that's the line we're going to take off, and we're going to hook our flexible line to that line when we pump the rest of the fluid out of the transmission. So I'm just going to take that white plastic ring that just peels off and comes out of the way. See if I can do this and show you. So I'm going to do that. It's going to be hard to show you that. I'm going to move that clip down. I'm just going to take this line and pull it out, just like that. I'm going to separate this little plastic clip up here, holding the two lines together. I'm just going to pop it out of that plastic, and then I pull that out. There's that clip that fits around that hard line that goes into the radiator. And I just push this one side down enough to get a hook in behind there. Just be careful, because you drop this down in there, you could have a really hard time finding it. So here you can see that end of that line coming out of the output line of the transmission. So all I'm going to do is take a piece of flexible hose and push this up over the hard line. If you need to, you think it's going to come off of there, put a little clamp on if you haven't. Just push it up. It should stay put there because of the the fitting, the way the fitting is. And I'm going to run that into a container, and then we'll start the engine. And when we start the engine, it's going to pump fluid out of there, and that's how we'll be able to tell. The actual color of the fluid will change, and all the old fluid gets out of the torque converter in the transmission. When it finishes clearing it out, you'll see the color change, or you would see the color change. I don't know if you'll be able to see it on camera. And we're just going to pump that in the container. Once we're done, we'll just come down, disconnect this, and hook that line back up. Put the clip back on, and we're done changing the fluid. So when you are having somebody run the car and it's pumping fluid out and you're pouring fluid in, if it gets to the point where it's not pumping fluid out because there's not enough getting into the dipstick tube as fast as it's coming out, you need to shut the car off. You don't want to run it without it pumping fluid. Put some more fluid in it, make sure it stays where it's always pumping fluid. You don't want to pump it dry. It can damage the transmission. So I've disconnected actually I thought it was the upper initially on this car into the upper radiator connection for the oil cooler for the transmission, but it's actually the lower. that I wanted to be connected to. So I've disconnected the lower, and I've got a line, flexible line, hooked to that lower hose, and I've got it going into my evacuation container here so I can see how much comes out. I don't know if you'll be able to see this on the camera or not, but you'll see it pump through there, and then you'll see the color change as I refill it as the new fluid goes in there. So I'm going to have somebody start the car. It'll immediately start pumping, and I'll start pouring in new fluid into the through the dipstick tube as I pump the old fluid out. What's remaining, it should only be 2.5 or 3 quarts. Most of this transmission fluid came out with the filter and pan change, 7.5 quarts or so. I'm going to have them start the car, and I'm going to fill as it pumps out, and I'll keep an eye on it and see when the color changes, and then we should be done. I start the car. There's the pump, pumping it out. I'm filling it at the same time, pumping it out. So I don't know if you can see that or not. You probably can't on camera. But I can see the color change. I think I need just a little more, but it's starting to clear here. It's starting to get into the good stuff, so I'm going to go 1 more quart just to be sure. And I have at least 1 more quart extra after I'm done, so I can make sure that I have enough for the transmission, which we'll do at the end. I start it up. I shut it off. That should be it. I probably got 4 quarts that I've run through that now. It's clean. I'm just looking at what's coming out of the hose right now, and it is clean. So I am through. All the old fluid has been pumped out, what was remaining, and we're good. I'm going to just let this drain down in this pan here. So I will hook this line back up, and pretty much done. So that's a complete flush of all the fluid in the transmission, including what is in the transmission and torque converter that you cannot get when you just do fluid and filter change by dropping the pan. I prefer to do it that way. Takes a little longer, but you get the whole transmission cleaned. So that's pretty much it. After the flush, basically check the fluid, turn the car on, kind of shifted through all the gears a few times, check the fluid again, and I took it out and drove it for 10 or 15 minutes, let the transmission come up the temperature, let the fluid circulate through the transmission, come back, check the fluid 1 more time, add any fluid if it needs fluid, make sure it was in range, and that's it. So it's pretty easy to do, especially for this car, and a lot of cars are just as easy. I highly recommend, if you're going to change your own transmission fluid and filter, that you flush it. It's better for the car, it's better for the transmission. If you just change that pan, as I said before, you're not going to get all the fluid out of it, and if it's burnt or worn out, you have a lot of fluid left in there that's no good and needs to be replaced. Just like any other fluid in your car, you need to change it when your maintenance schedule says to change it. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it helps you out. If you like the videos, subscribe below. Thanks for watching.